most people educated in Britain believe that the First World War was caused by, or the catalyst at least, was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Well, Ruchti, of course, realized that this was the myth that was being put out, and so he wrote an academic paper, which never really saw the light of day, but Steiner picked it up, and he quoted from it in a book, or in a series of lectures, actually, which emerged as a book entitled The Karma of Untruthfulness. And the full quote is, "History cannot be permanently falsified. The myth cannot stand up to the scrutiny of scientific research. The sinister web will be brought into the light and torn to pieces, however artfully it has been spun." And I think that was extremely prescient. That was written in 1915. But let's take a look at some of the stuff that has occurred in the meantime. William Engdahl mentioned Zbigniew Brzezinski, and he was certainly quoting and paraphrasing Zbigniew Brzezinski during the course of his presentation. Now, I referenced Zbigniew Brzezinski in my AV3 presentation, and I referenced the book that Brzezinski wrote in 1969, published in 1970, called Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era. And, I mean, although Brzezinski made a lot of extremely prescient observations in that book, one of the points that he made was that the challenge in the future was for governments to keep humanity locked into consumerist materialism and prevent them from finding out who they really are. So here's a guy, writing. He was in his 40s then. He's in his 80s now. He was in his 40s, and he was then making this observation. So he was obviously well aware that this was a threat to the powers that be way back then. Now, he's also, he was a protege of the Rockefellers, and he's the founder of the Trilateral Commission. He's the guy who identified Jimmy Carter, introduced Jimmy Carter to the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers funded Jimmy Carter's run for president. Now, he was out of favor during the Clinton years, so he went back into academia. But during the Clinton years, whilst he was in academia, he was doing something else. He was nurturing one of his students at Columbia University. And that student was a guy called Barack Obama. Brzezinski had effectively nurtured Obama for 20-plus years. There's no accident that Obama comes into the White House. But in the Clinton years, Brzezinski wrote a book called The Grand Chessboard, where he talked about the geopolitics of the 1990s and the post-collapse of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Empire. And he was making the observation that the US had never had a better opportunity to establish total domination. And he made the observation, he said, the public supported America's engagement in World War II largely because of the shock effect of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, he was making that observation because a little less than a year previously, Bill Clinton had gone as far as he probably dared to issue an apology. And that apology was made to the admiral, well, posthumously, made to the family of the admiral who was in charge of Pearl Harbor on that fateful day, December the 7th, 1941. And that admiral was Admiral Husband E. Kimmel. Now, Kimmel was kept out of the loop because Roosevelt knew the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor. Why did he know it? Because they were baited into attacking Pearl Harbor. They were baited into attacking Pearl Harbor to give America the excuse to enter into the Second World War. And Kimmel's predecessor actually caught wind of what was happening because he was being kept out of the loop. And so he asked all the right questions and was quietly promoted away from the Pacific Fleet. Kimmel was put in his place, and Kimmel didn't ask the questions because he was really very sort of new in the job. And in the subsequent inquiries, he was accused of being a drunkard, an alcoholic. He was actually accused of hosting an orgy on the night of December 6th, 1941. He was never allowed to attend any of the three inquiries into the Pearl Harbor attacks. He spent his life, and I have the documentation, he spent the rest of his life actually trying to find out who it was who made these accusations at the hearings. But he was never able to do so. So he died a broken man. But Clinton went as far as he dared in 1996 to offering an apology and saying that husband Kimmel was an all-American hero. And this was his counterpart. This was his counterpart in the military. This is interesting. Let's go back this way. Okay. This was his counterpart in the army, Walter C. Short, and he only came out of it slightly better off. But this was a classic case of history again being manipulated to enable the U.S. government to establish their agenda. Now, Brzezinski also made the observation that whilst America could only really establish itself as a superpower, his term, superpower, if it actually did so militarily, because he observed that, in his opinion, by 1997, it had lost the initiative to achieve this diplomatically. So he made the observation, he said, moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues, except in the circumstance of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat. 1997. A couple of years later, there was a document produced titled Strategic Energy Policy Challenges for the 21st Century. And this was labeled as a report of independent task force sponsored by James A. Baker, the James A. Baker Institute for Public Policy of Rice University. Well, there's nothing independent about this at all, because James A. Baker III definitely ain't independent, and Rice University is an oil university based in Houston, Texas. But then, of course, the third party to this was the Council on Foreign Relations. And in this report, it said the American people need to know about this situation, i.e. the fact that they were allegedly going to need control of overseas oil to maintain their lifestyle. They need to be told as well that there are no easy or quick solutions of today's energy problems. The president has to begin educating the public about this reality and start building a broad base of popular support for the hard policy choices ahead. In other words, aggressive warfare. And as William touched on today, and I've been speaking on for the past 4 or 5 years now, the whole hypothesis of peak oil is a total political construct. Now, I'm not for one moment suggesting that we continue extracting 90 million barrels of hydrocarbons a day and burning them, because there are alternatives available right now. But this is the way in which the global economy is controlled and, of course, is taxed. Now, the Project for a New American Century was also referenced by William Engdahl. This is a group known as PNAC. And PNAC published a report, which I'm going to reference in a second, but the members of PNAC are very interesting. Not least, this is the guy, John Bolton. I mean, this guy is a real piece of work. He was the PNAC chairman, and then he was appointed as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and he immediately set about trying to hijack the United Nations and effectively make them ineffectual. But the other members of PNAC, I'm sure you're going to recognize some of these guys, huh? Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, Louis Libby, John Negroponte, oh my gosh, Rumsfeld, Mr. Aspartame, Mr. Bird Flu, Mr. Tamiflu, Mr. Swine Flu, unbelievable. And this guy, Rabbi Dov Zakheim, need I say more? Now, on the day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld and his comptroller at the Pentagon, Rabbi Dov Zakheim, announced to the media, the day before 9/11, they announced that the Pentagon cannot account for $2.3 trillion. $2.3 trillion. Now, back then, that was a lot of money. Nowadays, it's worth about $5. Now, normally, if you're in PR, you know that if you've got something that you need to announce, you have to announce, but actually you don't really want it to get mega media coverage, you announce it on a Friday. September the 10th was a Monday. So it's pretty much guaranteed that it would be in the media unless something else happened. But how could he have known? I mean, incredible, isn't it? But that wasn't the only remarkable announcement that appeared in the media the day before 9/11, because this one also appeared. It was a press release. And it appeared in the Washington Times. And it said, this is an extract from the full report, and it was a report issued by the U.S. Army's School of Advanced Military Studies, i.e. some serious strategists.